Good evening, everyone, and welcome to In the Know with CaT Bobino. And today, my extra special guest is Callie Broaddus, and she is the CEO and founder, or executive director and founder, of Reserva, which is a entirely youth-funded nature reserve. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Oh, yes. So I know I just gave a small bio of who you are, but can you share a little bit more about what you're doing?
Sure. So I started this organization about a year and a half ago with the help of some pretty amazing youth from other parts of the globe. And the goal of the organization is to protect critical habitat for endangered species through the lens of youth activism and youth empowerment. So we're trying to kind of bridge this gap that exists between youth activism, which I think most of us, when we think of youth activism, we think of striking, signing petitions, skipping school and doing the things that really promote the youth voice. But there are also solutions that are really tangible and I think really contribute to mental health when you're dealing with such large scale problems like we're dealing with now. And there's some really effective solutions that are tried and true methods of conservation that haven't been really engaging youth. So I'm trying to bridge that gap between youth activism and conservation. And we're working right now on our first kind of flagship project, which is conserving the world's first entirely youth-funded nature reserve is the idea. And it's in the Ecuadorian Chocó cloud forest. And we're working with two incredible partners, Rainforest Trust, who are based in the US, and a group in Ecuador called Fundación Ecominga. And they are the ones who will own and manage this land, but we are working to help fund it. So that's us right now.
Well, that's amazing. So where are you from originally?
I'm from, right now I'm in Washington, D.C., but I grew up about an hour west of here in a small town called Warrenton, Virginia. So shout out to Fauquier County. But yeah, so I grew up in a rural area and always had an appreciation for nature. And I'm actually still actively involved with my local conservation organization on their board. And I think growing up around nature had a lot to do with why I'm working in nature today.
Oh, absolutely. I think that it's amazing that you've taken this opportunity from the United States and going overseas with it, especially, well, not overseas, but down to Ecuador and places like that. How did you get that involved in going to a different country and being able to work with Trust for Conservation?
Yeah, I mean, I think the vast majority of Earth's biodiversity, which is the diversity of life and species on this living planet, the vast majority is in the tropics. And so, as much as I support people working at home to conserve your own space and all that, the reality of it is we are losing so much critical habitat for endangered species and for biodiversity in the tropics right now that we can't afford to only work where we are. We need to be focusing on these areas. The area where we're working right now is called the Chocó, and most people listening have probably heard of the Amazon, but I'm willing to bet you might not, or maybe have just recently heard of the Chocó. It is one of the most, yard for yard, most biodiverse places on the planet, and yet most people don't know about it. It is also one of the most threatened places on the planet. In Ecuador, particularly, the lowland rainforest in the Chocó is down to 2% of its original range. And the cloud forest, which is just sort of as you go up the Andes Mountains, which is where this bioregion is located, the cloud forest is not in much better shape. So it's maybe 10% left, some people think maybe 20 or 30% left, but it's really chopped up.
Wow.
And so we are working in the northwest of Ecuador, in the Andes, in one of these regions that is not only incredibly threatened with, I mean, every time I go down, there's a new area of forest that's been burned, or where, you know, you see some activity from mining companies who are illegally exploring people's land to see if they can seize it, basically. Um, and and so it's an area that we haven't even studied. We don't even know necessarily what lives there. We know the big stuff, but there's so much left to learn, and we're losing it faster than we can protect it. So that's why we're there. It's just, for me, one of the top 5 places in the world that needs to be conserved right now.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I do have to admit that I know about the Amazon and some of the other forests and the destruction of it, of course. And we always hear about the people wanting to save the Amazon rainforest and how we're always fighting for it, but we don't hear about the other one. And what is it called again?
Called the Choco,
The Chico.
Choco, and the last O has an accent on it.
The Chico. Okay, yeah.
Our first
Yeah.
guest.
Yes, of course. He was quiet for like the last hour, and then this is what happens. But anyway, um, we don't hear about the Chico and what they're doing down there and how they are destroying the rainforest. So it's wonderful that you're putting a face to it and bringing it to the light that this is what's happening. But how did you first hear about this?
That's a great question. Well, you know, being kind of obsessed with biodiversity, and I had known about it for a little bit. One of the projects that really made it stick in my mind was, there's a project called Save the Choco, and it's run by Jim Muchmore and kind of in partnership with the Hocotoco Foundation in Ecuador. And basically, this guy, James Muchmore, said, the design and conservation needs a facelift. It's not sexy, and we've got to make it like everyone knows about the Amazon. No one knows about this place. So
Right.
he redesigned it, kind of packaged it, and people started to know about the Choco. So that was one area one platform, I guess, that really made me think about it more. But ultimately, the decision to work there came down to our incredible partners at Rainforest Trust. So it was actually quite a cool story. I first thought about this idea of just being a single project, like, let's make an entirely youth-funded nature reserve. That was the initial project. It wasn't an organization. It was just a project, just a thought.
Right.
And initially, I actually wanted to do it between National Geographic, where I worked at the time, and Rainforest Trust. And so I brought it to Rainforest Trust, and I said, I have this crazy idea. What do you think? And I thought that they would be like, get out of town, take a hike. Like, who wants to raise money from kids $5 at a time?
Right.
But they were like, oh my gosh, why has no one ever done that before? Yeah, of course we'll do that with you. And once they said yes, and Nat Geo kept saying, no, that doesn't fit in with what we're trying to do. We don't know where we would put you. And ultimately, I got the really good advice from a friend at Nat Geo, just, hey, quit your job that you love and just do this. And it was really terrifying, but I did. But ultimately, it was definitely the right decision. And I went to Rainforest Trust, and once it was really happening, and I knew I was leaving and that we were doing this thing, and I had the support of about 20 really incredible youth, mostly in the UK, that I was working with, including Bella Lack, who was my first partner.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and went to them and said, okay, this is what we need to do. We need to find a place that's big enough that it's like impressive if we protect it,
Yes.
but like, and important enough that, like, even if it's small, it's really going to be significant, and that we can communicate to kids how important it is that they help. And but also, ideally, something that's small enough that we can accomplish it. So they came out with a couple proposals that their existing partners had already sent to them, and they said, okay, you know, these partners, they're here, 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 and here.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about these proposals? And ultimately, this project in Ecuador just wound up being the perfect fit. And we so lucked out with the partner that we work with there. They have not only been incredible to work with and open, like just open arms, invited us to be part of their research expeditions involving youth in more ways than, like, I mean, really on the ground involving youth, which I didn't expect that. I think we got lucky that the director is so excited about the concepts that we proposed. But not only that, they've actually now added 2 youth members to their board of directors. So this is an organization that has taken this concept that young people need to be, at the adult table
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to conservation, and taken it to heart. And they are going places with it. So
That's
anyway,
amazing. Yeah.
long-winded answer, but
No. It's good because it gives a lot of information, but I don't think a lot of people think about youth being involved and wanting to have their voices heard. But unfortunately, that's typically what a youth wants, especially a teenager, is to be heard and to have a seat at the table. So that's really cool that you are allowing that to happen. And I just want to remind everyone we're live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter simultaneously. And if you have a comment or a question, feel free to put it in the chat and we can read it out aloud, especially if it's a good question, and go from there. But we're talking to Callie Broaddus, and she is talking about Reserva, which is a youth-funded nature reserve or projects that they do with the natural reserve. So back to you, Callie. With all of this that you are doing, how did you get started? Let's go back to college. So, like, what did you study in college to get to this level?
okay, this is not going to be intuitive, but I actually have a degree in architecture. So
Oh.
I took a very roundabout way to get where I am. But as I said, as a kid, I was always in love with nature. I had a club called the Nature Nuts, and my name was Pistachio. Like I was, I was crazy about nature. But really interested in all things, as most kids are. And I wound up feeling like my strengths were in math and art, and
Mm-hmm.
really love science, but figured architecture, that's kind of a cool middle ground. And by the end of a 4-year degree in architecture, I was like, well, this was awesome. Love what I learned, but I don't want to be an architect. So
Right.
I took the skills I'd developed and figured, okay, like, what can I make of this now? I have an architecture portfolio. What do I do with this? And I wanted to get back to nature some way, but using what I had. And so I thought, well, National Geographic Kids, that's like one of the things that made me fall in love with nature, National Geographic
Mm-hmm.
World at the time. And so I found a parent of a friend who worked at Nat Geo and asked, can I come visit you, please, at your office and bring my portfolio and just like drop it on the desk of someone at Nat Geo Kids?
Right.
And she was like, sure. And so I went to visit her in DC, and literally we walked down the halls together asking for the creative director of Nat Geo Kids. And we're like, are you Eva Absher? Hello, excuse me. Do you know where I can find Eva Absher? And I ran into someone in the hall, and she was like, yeah, that's me. And she was like, who are you? And I handed her my portfolio, and I said, my name's Callie Broaddus. I have a design background and would like to work here. I'll do anything. Just let me know if you have a job. And 2 months later, she emailed me and said, I just found your portfolio sitting on my desk in an envelope. Can you come in for an interview? And it's not always supposed to happen like that, but it did for me. And 7 years later, I felt like I had been, I'd really loved working there at Nat Geo Kids, designing books.
Mm-hmm.
And I had gotten to know so many people in the field of conservation and exploration through National Geographic's explorers, who were
Mm-hmm.
constantly like coming through the cafeteria and on the elevator. Became my friends, and I think I was really influenced by what they were doing, and thought, I love what we do here at Nat Geo Kids, but I wanted to do something that was more direct, more tangible, and
Right.
immediate. And there are a few other things that went into that decision to leave, but that's kind of the career path.
Oh, wow. Well, that's the thing in life, any career and anything that we do is usually not a linear path. We always have nice little curves that we go through to get to where we want to be. So I totally understand that. But that's really cool that you got an opportunity to know someone at Nat Geo who opened the door, like
Yep.
literally opened the door for you to walk in and find someone who can help you. So
Yeah.
that's not normal, but it happens, and I'm very happy for you and slightly jealous at the same time. I love Nat Geo, so my jealousy is a little there. I have to admit,
Yeah.
but that's really
Yeah.
cool. I have a random question. I know, and it's from me. Have you ever heard of the magazine Ranger Rick?
Of course, I was like Nat Geo, World, Ranger Rick, and Zoo Books. Those were my three. Those were my novels.
Yes. Okay. So I've always bought up this magazine. I loved Ranger Rick as a kid. Not too many people remember it though, but per your conversation, I was like, she might know Ranger Rick magazine.
Hey, they're still going strong. Actually, Ranger Rick is really great, and I didn't mention this, but on the side, while I was doing the Nat Geo Kids thing, I've been a wildlife photographer for a while, and I did some journalism and photography on the side just to kind of use the rest of my brain,
Yeah.
and so I've really grown to appreciate Ranger Rick because they're one of the few magazines out there, especially for kids, who actually invest in real wildlife photographers, and they have this list that they send out. They ask wildlife photographers. They say, "Hey, we're going to be doing a story on you know box turtles this issue. What do you have? Here's your opportunity." And I think that's really cool because a lot of other groups and National Geographic is similar. Well, first thing they go to stock photos because they have so much work to do, and not National Geographic magazine at all, but National Geographic Kids. When we were there, we really had to rely on stock photos, and it's very difficult to go directly to photographers. So I really appreciate Ranger Rick because they are one of the magazines that really supports wildlife photographers.
Well, that's really, really cool. Yeah. I grew up reading Ranger Rick. I always wanted to be a kid either on there or on Bill Nye the Science Guy TV show. I was like, I just want to be one of the children on there and do things and touch things and be a part of it. So that's really amazing.
I one time ran into Bill Nye in a Zany Brainy. I don't know if you ever went
I've
into one
heard
of those stores,
hmm
but I walked into a Zany Brainy once when I was like, I don't know, 7 years old or something, and Bill Nye was there blowing smoke rings. He was doing like a smoke ring demonstration. It was like one of those like incredible moments of your childhood you'll never forget.
Right. I actually saw Bill Nye at a talk here in Oakland at the Cal Academy of Science. And so they were asking the audience, do you have any questions? So I raised my hand and I was like, hey, Bill Nye, when are we going to have a woman on TV doing what you do, talking about science and bringing it to the world? And he was like, I don't know, like soon, that's a great question. Hopefully soon. And I was like, but how are you helping this? Helping us get to this level, you know. But yeah, that's my Bill Nye story. He will never admit it, but that's what happens.
Yeah, ask the tough questions.
So, transitioning from Nat Geo Kids to working with National Trust and being a part of the conservation, how did that go? I know that you had a friend who was just like, quit your job, do it. But how did it go from being at Nat Geo Kids to actually getting into going to Ecuador and being a part of that?
Yeah, well, so I'm going to take a step back and get a little personal here, but
Okay.
part of my motivation for for doing this and for really committing everything I had to it was about 7 years ago. My little sister was diagnosed with cancer, and she was a climate activist. She was 17 years old, and was just deeply, deeply passionate about the environment, as was I. And when she was diagnosed, she knew that the prognosis wasn't good, and she wanted to commit everything she had to fighting climate change in the time that she had left. And so she started a fund, and she wanted to raise $18,000 by the time she turned 18, which was like 3 or 4 weeks later. And when that day came, she had raised $70,000 from like 432 donors. And
Wow.
I mean, she was like completely blown away to find out that's how much she had raised. And before she died, she made it to about $100,000 within like another month or two, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And she was able to give her first few grants to organizations combating climate change before she passed away. And to date, her organization, her fund, has given out over $250,000 in grants to organizations combating climate change. And so that taught me several lessons. I mean, aside from, you know, just kind of feeling like I want to carry that torch forward, it also taught me that young people have an incredible financial power if
Mm-hmm.
they have a passion and a purpose and are able to communicate what they care about. They have the ability to transcend political boundaries to get people to donate to causes they would never normally donate to. I grew up in a very, very red area. Most of those 432 donors probably never thought about climate change once in their lives
Mm.
until Finley asked them to donate to it. So, I think youth have an incredible communicating power and an incredible financial power. And there are 3.5 billion people under 30 in this world. And if we're not focusing on them as a potential group of donors, then
Mm-hmm.
we're missing out on a huge opportunity to affect change and to raise funds, critical funds for necessary conservation. So those were things that were kind of like jumping around in my mind. And I think, when I lost my sister, um, all of the ideas of, what I wanted to be when I grew up, and like, I'd like to work my way up and be an executive here or whatever, all
Right.
of that really went out the window, and just gave me a pretty much a tunnel vision of, I need to do like my version of what she cared about. She was really into climate change. I'm really into biodiversity, and both, parallel crises that are, we need to solve them both to solve each other.
Yes.
And so I don't know, just I didn't really care about anything else anymore, and so it made it a very simple decision to start working on something that would combine my passion for biodiversity and my experience in the world of kids, and with, my knowledge of what my sister had been able to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and honestly, it was just one day. I remember we were brainstorming at Nat Geo Kids, and I just thought of it. It's like, wait, has anyone ever done that? Like, has anyone ever just like done a entirely youth funded reserve? And I Googled it, couldn't find anything, and so it began. But I think I got pretty lucky. Like, there are, just speaking practically, there are a lot of practical skills and know-how that come along with starting an organization. And I should say, a lot of people say we are a youth funded reserve. We're an organization. Our main project is creating, right now, is creating this reserve. We intend to create a network of youth funded reserves around the world.
Mm.
And we work through conservation, education, and storytelling to amplify that impact, to impact global policy on conservation. So we do quite a lot. But what we talk about most is this one project in Ecuador. And which, the next one won't be in Ecuador, it'll be somewhere else.
Right.
But at any rate, just practically speaking, I think the things that were most useful for me in making that transition were, I had writing skills. I had worked a little bit as a journalist, not the best writer, but it was good enough.
Mm-hmm.
I had a ton of my own photography, so I could make a really visual pitch when I was doing these business presentations and things, and trying to get people to get on board with my idea.
Right.
I was able, as a designer, I was able to design something that looked like more or less a brand that had existed for a while. And that's still a comment that I get now, like just from our website and stuff. People are like, "Wow, who's your designer?" And like, how long have you been around? It's like, "Oh, I actually did that in like 3 hours in the library." But yeah, I just don't tell anyone.
Right.
um, but those were really important skills that I think most people would have to hire out or have to get help doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had some kind of business know-how. Like I knew how to work a spreadsheet. I knew how to build a basic budget. And so those things I think were pretty critical, and feeling and having the confidence to take the jump from
Mm-hmm.
leaving my job that I'd had for 7 years. And then also, practically speaking, I had a good job for 7 years. So I knew starting a nonprofit, I was probably not going to be able to make a salary for the first 2 years. So I
Mm-hmm.
had to do some budgeting and make sure I could afford to survive, and buy a lot of ramen. But I had to have the confidence that I could make it, so that because you can't do two things at once. If you're going to start something new, you have to be able to pour absolutely everything you have into it. So those
Yes,
are some of my
that's amazing, and I'm so sorry for your loss, and I get it that wanting to keep the legacy going and being a part of something amazing. Um, like my background is in biology and animal biology, but like my 9 to 5 is working with in finance, and it's wonderful. It's one of the things where I've also taught like finance to children, to middle school and high school.
interesting.
And I've always told them, I can throw a stone and probably hit a cupcake shop. Like everyone sells cupcakes. I can get them from the grocery store. I can get them from an actual bakery. There's cupcakes. But if you're a 12-year-old and you're selling cupcakes, odds are someone's going to buy them from you because you're a 12-year-old.
Yep.
So you can use that youth as a platform.
Yeah,
And
totally.
so, yeah.
That's actually something we talk about a lot. People think of kids as so, so innocent and sweet, and they are. But
Yes.
we talk about, use that. Like, this is a
Mm-hmm.
tool that you have. But use
Right.
it to your advantage, because you don't have it forever.
No, you
So
do not. It is fleeting. It seems like childhood lasts forever and then adulthood goes by super quickly. But
yeah,
yeah, you have this opportunity as someone who is young to get your face out there and to bring attention to something that people may not have thought about, and they're more inclined to help you as a youth than they are to help me as an adult. And
exactly.
so that's really phenomenal that you've taken that to a different level. I think sometimes we ask youth for their opinion, but we don't put them actually at the table. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I like to kind of equate it to getting to a seat at the kids' table. Like, that's not what we want.
right,
We
right.
want a seat
No,
at the actual one, the real one. And yeah, and there are some legitimate challenges to working with youth. I mean, there's a reason that people hire people with experience, because they've learned
hmm
a lot of lessons. They're better often at what they do,
right,
and they know most of the time they just have learned a lot of lessons that are important that youth haven't. And in terms of raising money from youth, there are challenges to that too. Most kids don't have the ability to donate more than $5 or $10, and so
right.
that means you have to put in a lot of effort because you need to reach more people. But I don't think that those are insurmountable challenges, and I think that the rewards far outweigh the challenges, and we just have to get a little bit creative.
hmm
Um, so I got to say, like, one of our projects is called the Million Letters for Nature campaign,
Okay.
and so we know that a lot of kids aren't going to have the ability to donate even $5 or even $10, especially the kids living in the area where our reserve is located.
hmm
Um, and in future reserves, and so we needed to have a way to, offer those kids the same ability to take direct action as those living in DC or in London. And so we started this campaign, and what we do is we ask kids to write a letter saying what they love about nature and why it's important that we protect it, and protect at least 30% of our planet by 2030. That's what we're trying to do.
mm
That's a big benchmark that we need the UN, world governments, to commit to.
Right.
And when they write their letter, we compile it to send to the UN. And then we also match it with $3 toward the reserve. So kind of like a global lemonade stand. You know, we would buy their lemonade and they could donate that money to the reserve. We're skipping a step here, but they send us their letter. We have some matching funds, and we match it with $3 toward the reserve. And $3 might not sound like a lot, but it's enough to protect about the size of an average classroom. So it's, I mean, when you see this forest, this is a cloud forest. It is, every single tree is like, you know, it's like a hotel for animals. It is
Yes.
just so dense, so incredibly jam-packed with life. A classroom, I mean, you're saving thousands of animals.
Right.
So, so that's one of those solutions that's like, you know, we just have to be a little bit creative, and we can do a lot just through this lens.
Yes, and I think, and I want to slightly clarify for anyone who's listening now or later. When you think of the size of a classroom, you think of animals. A lot of times we only think of the mammals and
Yeah.
sometimes the reptiles, but it's way broader than that. We're talking about microorganisms all the way up to the furry and feathery friends. So, when you have a classroom or a tree in a rainforest, it can house so many things from the bottom layer all the way to the canopy, from predators to prey to everything. So, when Callie is saying that, she's saying that there is an insurmountable amount of animals that we may not even know exist because of their size, or, things that we just never seen before. And they're on these trees and in these rainforests that are unfortunately being destroyed because, and for me, I say it's because of money. There's
Yeah.
really the basis of it is because of money.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the number one threat to this ecosystem we're working in is the exploration from gold mining. And I mean, that's as much clearly a link to money as you can come up with. And another reason that this being deforested is because the people who live in the area don't have much money, and they
Right.
need to cut down the forest to use it to make an income, to make a just to be able to scrape by. And so we also work with our in-country partner to develop alternative livelihood projects just to reduce the pressures that are on that landscape that make it endangered in the first place.
Right.
So yeah, I definitely encourage anyone who's watching, please follow Reserva at Reserva YLT. Check out our website and sign up for our newsletter and stuff, because we have some really cool projects going on right now that just, it's our partners who are doing it. They are so good, and we will share all the information about that just in due course. So.
Oh yes, I put it in the chat so anybody who's watching can see it for your website. And yes, I think that is a very important thing that you're doing, because a lot of times people don't think about what the rainforest is offering us outside of finding money. And I think a lot of times people don't realize, like, I'm in Oakland, which is across the way from San Francisco. And back in the day it was the gold rush. And so Oakland it was named that because of the oak trees that no longer exist because of the gold rush. So, as much as I love my town and in my area, it used to be a very diverse, tree-filled place, and we don't want to lose that, especially in the ways that we're losing it now, and all of the positivity that comes from having rainforests. We need them, definitely.
Yeah.
So I applaud you on all of that. But I'm gonna change course just a little bit and talk about your photography and how you got into being a wildlife photographer, and where did that come from for you?
I don't know. I started taking pictures when I was like 7 or something. I had one of those little cameras that was like this wide, and then you take a picture and it prints out, and there's a little strip. Yeah, so I've been taking pictures since I was really little. I got seriously into the fun of photography through horseback riding. I worked at a barn and mucked stalls and all that stuff, and just spent a lot of time around the barn taking pictures of horses, and I would try to sell it to the people who rode there.
Right.
And I actually started, I think I started selling pictures when I was like 13 years old. So, and eventually, I mean, I started taking it pretty seriously through high school, college, and every time I would buy a little bit better gear and just kept investing in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was always animals, because it was always horse sports and stuff like that. But it wasn't until I started working at Nat Geo and I started watching all these talks from these explorers and photographers coming through, where they talked about the impact of their photography because they had worked so hard on making their photography also art, also really thinking about the way they use light. And
Mm.
I never had much patience for that. And it wasn't until I'm like, who cares what the light looks like if you capture the thing? It actually matters, because if you can get your photo to be more striking and more effective at communicating its story that it's trying to tell, then you're gonna have the person's attention for longer. And so I started working on it a lot more seriously, probably 8 years ago or so, and got just started taking a lot more wildlife photos. And I want to give a shout out to my friend Daniel Dietrich. One of my first times that I got to photograph North American mammals.
Mm-hmm.
My first time photographing a coyote, my first time photographing a bobcat, and really helped me get just super hooked on the wildlife photography thing was in, I think it was probably 2017 or 2018 or something like that. And he took me out on a safari in Point Reyes, California. So
Yes.
any friends out there watching who are from Point Reyes, hit up Daniel Dietrich, just Point Reyes Safaris. And he really influenced me and gave me a lot more patience for and kind of the thrill of wildlife photography in America, which you don't actually need to leave America to take amazing wildlife photos. So yeah, that's
That's
probably how
really
I got
cool.
into it. Yeah.
How was it, photographer taking photos of like coyotes and bobcats and things like that?
So it was pretty cool. The very first, really the first coyote photo I ever got, the first worthwhile coyote photo I ever got was with Daniel, and he spotted this coyote from, I mean, a mile away. The guy's eyes are literally like little telescopes. And he drove down. He was in the driver's seat. I had my camera, and I know he was like kicking himself for not having his gear up and ready, but he was very selfless and drove down to this coyote. It was on the side of the road, and he did a quick Yui, and I like whipped out my camera, took a quick photo. The coyote just sort of like got up, started walking away. It walked across a little stream, and then it stopped on a rock and turned around and stared straight at us. And I took another photo, and then it walked off. And I just remember thinking like, oh my God, I really hope my settings were okay. Like all those like auto memory things that you have where you move your fingers without even realizing it. Like I hope
Mm-hmm.
I did it all correctly. And we were both kind of breathless, and he looked at me, he was like, did you get it? And I was like, I think so. And we went back home, brought it up on the computer, and when we looked at the photo, it turned out this coyote had blue eyes. This is a
Ooh.
coyote that Daniel had seen a few times before. He was the first person ever to photograph it. And I don't know if I was the second or what, but this was the first image that was like super, super publishable.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took it to National Geographic because that's where I worked at the time. And I
Right.
took it, I didn't work with the news people, but I took it to them and I was like, hey guys, there's like never been a documented case of a blue-eyed coyote before. So any interest in publishing this image and maybe a little story? And they were like, sure, can you write? And I had been writing a little bit for a small magazine in my hometown. And so I sent them that stuff and they were like, actually pretty good. Yeah, go ahead, write the story. So
Wow.
that coyote and that blue-eyed coyote and that opportunity to photograph with Daniel turned into my first my first writing gig for National Geographic, and also my second. We did a follow-up article on that. And yeah, it turned into a really cool project. So anyway, that's kind of the implication that experience had on my career, but or
Wow.
the effect it had on my career. But I mean, just the ability to photograph an animal like that, or a bobcat.
Mm-hmm.
I know we have them where I grew up in Fauquier County. I've never seen one in my county. Like, we are a rural county. People hate these animals because they're considered vermin.
Right.
There is no bag limit on the number of coyotes you can kill. You can kill as many
Oh,
as you want. No one will
wow.
ask you a second. Like, no one will take a second.
Mm.
And the thing is, like, they're so hard to see. And when you actually see one and get to watch it behave naturally in an environment where it actually can't be hunted in that national park, they're like dogs. Like, they're so fun. They're really cool, and it's such a cool experience. So I wish that we didn't have such pressure on them as we do in Virginia and every other state,
Yes.
because getting to watch these large animals that they're not going to hurt people, they're just really cool to watch. That's a really special thing. So.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I feel like the unfortunate part is, when you think of coyotes and bobcats and that they're predators and, they're going to go after small prey, whether that's a rabbit or a dog or a cat, they're going to go after small prey. And, and sorry about that. He's staring at me and yelling at me. But yes, they're going to go after small prey. And when you build your house in their land and you have your small animal outside, or you build your farm or whatever into the land that they've already occupied, of course they're going to come on your land. Of course they're going to kill chickens and everything like that. I mean, that's what they do, but you also went into the land that they already was in. So
Right.
I don't get it. I don't understand.
Well, I mean, the irony of it is there are no scientific studies showing that killing coyotes actually helps with the problems we're trying to fix by killing coyotes. In fact, it does quite the opposite.
Yes.
Coyote numbers have increased since we began persecuting them. They
Wow.
are now the U.S. In the U.S. we kill 500,000 coyotes a year. The U.S. government, under the Department of Agriculture,
Oh my goodness.
the government kills 80,000 coyotes on taxpayer dollars every year. And
Oh, wow.
I didn't know that until I wrote this article for Nat Geo, but
Right.
but I mean, it's pretty incredible how much we persecute them, and yet the scientific studies show by hunting them, not only do we not decrease the number of like coyotes taking livestock, we actually make the problem worse because they're less able to hunt together. And usually the ones that are taken out are the alphas, the ones that actually know how to hunt wild game. But also we increase their reproduction rate. The coyotes have a really cool evolutionary advantage where if they're very stressed out and if the howls get further apart, or there's signals to them that say our population is under stress, they have more pups more often, and
Wow.
so they just reproduce and reproduce and reproduce. And so that's why we're seeing coyotes everywhere now. And yeah, so it's pretty messed up. There's a really good film out right now. It's just came out. It's called I think it's called Wildlife Killing Contests. This is something that most people don't know is a thing, but in most states there are actual contests for just to see how many bobcats, coyotes, foxes, wolves you can kill at a single time. It's blood
Wow.
sport. It's not ethical hunting. It is just how many can we kill. There are prizes for the biggest, for the oldest, for all that, and it's pretty messed up considering the scientific evidence that shows it doesn't work. So definitely encourage anyone watching to go check out that film by Philippe D'Andrade. Just came out. So yeah. Anyway.
Oh, that could have damper
Sorry.
I know it's okay because it needed to be said, you know. That's just oh, that's so terrible that people feel like that's I don't know, makes you feel like a big
Yeah.
man
Yeah,
to
I guess
kill an animal that's not even bothered with you.
I can empathize. Like, I grew up on a farm. We have chickens. We had 4 chickens taken by a fox in one day last year. Like, I can empathize. It sucks to lose your animals, especially like for me, they're basically pets, but for
Right.
other people, it's their livelihood. So if you start to see these animals as the enemy, I can understand why you would treat them like that. But we do need to spread more awareness about the scientific implications and the just sort of the rights of these animals to exist. There are
Right. I mean,
really good organizations out there doing that communication. Project Coyote is my favorite. You can Google
mhm.
them, projectcoyote.org, I think. But yeah,
Yeah,
lots to do.
that there is a lot to do, and I think it's changing the perception people have of these predators, and making it known that they really don't want anything to do with us, like at all. They want to live their lives in their own terms, but the more we build into their population or their habitat, the more we destroy their habitat. Of course, they're going to come in and start doing things. You know,
Exactly.
it boggles my mind when someone lives in the near a foresty area here, and then you see on the news, oh, bobcat in somebody's backyard. It's like, of course they was in your
Of
backyard.
course, yeah.
You're in their
Yeah.
backyard. So just boggles my mind. Anyway, yeah, so that's just one of those things. Hopefully people listening will think about this more, look into it more. I mean, just killing them off is not helpful at all. It's not going to change. As a matter of fact, it's going to make things worse, you
Yeah.
know. And on one hand, you mentioned that they actually start breeding more, but I think another part of it is we don't realize how many the prey that they kill will now breed more too
Yeah.
if there's no predator to take them out.
Yeah.
So
And coyotes, their main diet is rats, mice,
right,
and rats. Like, you want some free rodent control? Keep your coyotes around.
right. Just let them be. You know,
Yeah.
they'll get rid of the actual vermin that we have.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. And yeah, and I think the same concept applies in the tropics where we're working now, just to bring it back to Reserva and what we're doing. Like, people need to think about these predators as parts of an ecosystem. And when you lose the pumas or the jaguars or the jaguarundis and ocelots, when you lose them, when you take them out because they've taken your chickens, then you get a shift in the ecosystem that can really throw things out of whack.
right.
Um, and one of the most interesting things right now that we're seeing is, I mean, interesting, horrible, but interesting, is there are a lot of areas where people have cleared small patches of land. It's a
Hmm.
cloud forest. You're not supposed to get direct sunlight down to the ground,
Right.
but they do. And because the mycelium, the mushroom roots, basically that are holding all the ground together are getting all this direct sunlight. They kind of shrivel up, it kills what's in the soil, and it
Hmm.
destabilizes the ground. And they're seeing so many more landslides
Right.
because so they're getting really dangerous landslides and mudslides because they've thrown the ecosystem out of whack. And it literally changes the structure of the ground. So that's one of those things that it's you have to be educated about it because it doesn't come naturally to think about mushrooms being that important, or it's always a chain reaction.
Always. There's always a reaction. I mean, just being here on the West Coast in California, the reason we have mudslides is because there's nothing holding the ground together. There's no grass, there's no shrubs, no trees. So
Mm-hmm.
when those things go away, the ground becomes more loose. Now we have mudslides. There's always
Yeah.
a chain reaction with this. And as you mentioned, a cloud forest, that's a forest where, you know, the canopy is so dense that the clouds start to form pretty much in the canopy or
Yeah.
below the canopy, and so they don't get a lot of sunlight. And so now you're bringing that in, and you change the flora and the fauna, and it escalates all the way to us. So you're
Yeah.
really just killing us at the same time that you are destroying the
Exactly.
forest. So I don't know. Anyway, we are getting close to an hour, which is cool because it was really fun talking to you. So I'm just give you this opportunity. Well, two more questions. One, hopefully the pandemic will be over soon. So, what do you see for you in Reserva in the next few years, hopefully when this pandemic is over?
Well, we have a lot of big plans. So
Yeah.
we only have about $30,000 left to raise to finish this first reserve. So any kids who are watching, anyone with kids, uh, have a lemonade stand. Help us out. It's or a virtual lemonade stand. I don't know how that would work, but we are really looking forward to finishing this project up so we can start the next one. I think we'll finish up at probably the start of the summer, and we'll be able to start looking at our next site and also working to expand this one. So yeah, I think as we've been quite nimble with the pandemic. It was very easy to go virtual with our events. And I think that's the cool thing about working with youth is everyone is just so easy to change. Just change gears. It's like, oh, we got a problem, no problem. Okay, let's just
Right.
do something else then. People don't get so stuck in existing ideas, and so yeah, I think we will focus on impacting the 2021 Convention on Biological Diversity. We've teamed up with National Geographic Campaign for Nature to advocate for
Oh,
protecting 30% of our planet by 2030. We have got to get world governments on board with that post 2020 global biodiversity framework. So that's one thing we're going to focus on. We will do that through our Million Letters campaign. So anyone who's watching, please go to reservaYLT.org, and there's a 1 Million Letters campaign tab. Just go write us a letter. There's instructions how there. We'll match it with $3, so you don't even need to donate. Of course, please do if you want. But yeah, and then we actually are already thinking about our next project. We have a pretty cool youth donor who's interested in kind of helping us get even bigger, and we're looking at really scaling up. So this is the first one. The next one will probably be the biggest one. So yeah,
right.
lots to do. No
Yeah,
time to wait.
that's good. I think you might have already answered this last question, but how can people get more involved?
Yeah, definitely. We're really active on Instagram. We always respond to messages and stuff. So uh, follow us on Instagram, all the social stuff. But please do, uh, subscribe to our newsletter. We don't send out a ton of emails. And then just check out the website, participate in the Million Letters campaign, get your friends to participate in the Million Letters campaign, get their friends to participate in the Million Letters campaign. I can't stress this enough. We have the matching funds to be able to match, the first probably 100,000 letters that we get, and we're at about 3,000. So there's a lot of work to be done there. I can't stress it enough. Please participate. And then this is open to anybody 26 and under, or who wants to work with or in honor of someone 26 or under. That's our kind of nebulous definition of youth.
Yeah.
And so, like, if this is something that strikes a chord with you, and you want to do something that, if it would make you feel better to do something that has an immediate impact, just help us out. Start a fundraiser. It could be anything. Play to your strengths. We have one kid who thought, I want to have an online concert. And he got Olivia Rodrigo to sing in an online concert. I mean, it was a group effort. And we had an online concert that raised like $2,000 for conservation. We have someone else who didn't really know what they wanted to do, and he had already donated. And he was just really into biodiversity and recording insects and things like that. So he wound up doing a BioBlitz for his neighbors in their backyard. And the idea was, I'll BioBlitz your backyard and tell you what lives there, and you make a donation to Reserva. And so
Wow.
there are a million ways to make an impact. Just don't sit at home and do nothing, because every day you do nothing, you lose ground. So
Right.
yeah, please
Well,
participate.
that's awesome. Yeah, I've shared your the website on my social media. especially in the chat with this. I hope to share it more and get more people to see what's going on. I think this is great. If you just give me a minute, I'm going to just turn you off for a second and say my goodbyes. And then just 1 minute. All right, everyone. Thank you for being a part of In the Know with CaT Bobino. I know you hear Carter in the background. And some of you don't even want to see me. You want to see Carter, but that's fine. You're going to have to watch me without him from time to time. But make sure you check us out on Facebook Live, YouTube, Twitter. I'm going to share all this information on there. And then we're going to go live again tomorrow at 11 with Alex Troutman, who is a wildlife biologist, and talk to him about the things he's doing. But thank you for tuning in on this Wednesday evening. Good night.